Hello and welcome to Dream Big. I'm Hannah Viviers. Today we are going to be speaking to serial entrepreneur Denis Fourie, and he's going to be speaking to us about his personal story of becoming an entrepreneur. Denis, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Hannah.
I think I kind of started that wrong because I said of becoming an entrepreneur, but I think that a lot of entrepreneurs are kind of like born that way, nurtured this. I think differently from the beginning. So I would like you to start for us from your first business venture. You were saying to me you were really, really young still.
Yeah, as my first venture, well, let me put it, the first time I found out I was an entrepreneur was actually when my father decided to give me some chores to do. And he said to me, Denis, he said, I've got these poles, there's 5 of these poles, long, old, rusted poles, and he said to me, okay, if you sand each and every one down and you put a base coat on it, I'm going to give you 20 Rand a pole. Now, please understand that we're talking about 30 years ago, okay? 20 Rand back then was a lot of money. It was a new bicycle, okay? You get $100. That was a new bicycle. The state of the art was $150. Yeah. So this was great. And he said to me, okay, you do that. I got my mates and I said, okay, well, you know what, we're going to start off and we're going to start sanding these poles down. Started sanding them down, lasted about 20 minutes. Okay, I was about, 9-10 years old. And I said, no, this is rubbish. You know, why should I be doing this work? You know, this is too much labor and stuff, and I'm lazy. Okay. And myself and my mate got onto our bicycles and we traveled down and we eventually found these 2 laborers. And we said, okay guys, if you come on through, we're going to pay you for the day. Now bearing in mind at that stage, the going rate for labor for a day and that was, I think it was about 10 or 15 Rand or something, or 20 Rand or something for the day. And we offered them the money and said, well, come on, you do this and that. The afternoon my father comes back, my mum was shouting at him, no, you can't pay him, you know, he didn't do the work. Yeah, my father looks at this and he looks at the poles and it's all done very nicely and that. He says, okay, well, so what happened? I said, well, what I did is I went and hired 2 guys. I gave them each $20. I went to the shop, I bought a loaf of bread, I bought butter, I bought jam and everything, and I made them sandwiches and I bought cool drink and everything. At the end of the day, it cost me 52 Rand and 50 cents for everything. Okay. And I got 100 Rand out of the deal. And my mom's going, no, you can't give him the money. My father said, no, he's an entrepreneur. This is what an entrepreneur is. I was like, Dad, what's an entrepreneur? Yeah. He says it's someone that takes something from nothing and turns it into cash. And that's pretty much, you know, where I realized I was an entrepreneur. Then moving on from that, I started with caddying, you know, to do pocket money and stuff, you know.
But I've seen this as well. I'm going to let you finish that story in a moment. But I've seen, because we're Facebook friends, and we're friends in real life, but I mean, we see more of each other's lives online, exactly. I think, and I think that's most people. But I see that this is something that you're nurturing in your daughter as well. You know, the spirit of doing stuff. And for me, I think that when we talk about entrepreneurship, we see people when they're successful when they're older. But what I've realized, a lot of the entrepreneurs that I'll read their books, a lot of them start out like you. Yes. It's a little project and they can remember they were 8 or they were 9 or they were 10 and somebody nurtured that in them.
Exactly, yes. And I do that with my daughter too. Every little thing. So I look at it, my sweetheart, and tell me, what would you do differently? What do you think it should be? And she'd come up with these crazy ideas. Say, Dad, you know, when I'm big, I'm going to make this, and this because it's better. And people will buy it because of this. And I'm going to make money out of it.
But I don't know. I think you get this as well because you're a business mentor. Yes. So you get a lot of people who are wanting to start something and they come to you to help them, or they've already started something and they would like you to help them make it better. But one of the things that I've realized is that this word entrepreneur, just about so many people use it. I'm an entrepreneur. I've got my own business. And we were talking about this, you know, about what it really means to be an entrepreneur. And I know there's so many definitions, but one of the things in Dream Big, somebody was asking me, what are you actually trying to do? And I think one of the things, my version on the program is really to get people to start stuff, you know. But I think the problem sometimes comes in is people just kind of, you know, they're not really sure about how to make something out of what they have. So I'd like you to speak a little bit about that.
Making something out of nothing is, well, first of all, an entrepreneur, someone is going to take something, got an idea, sees a market, sees a need in the market for it, and goes forward and develops it and actually makes money out of it. You get a lot of people that have great ideas but don't ever implement it. Those aren't entrepreneurs in that. I do think, however, that entrepreneurs, the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs is they've got these concepts, but they can't actually take it through to starting a business and then eventually actually running with that business and that. And it's conceptualizing that idea, and what's conceptualizing there, but actually taking that, looking at the market, saying, does the market actually need this? Can I actually make a business out of this this product or concept that I've come up with, and how do I price it, etc. And looking at the market need. That's the biggest problem with entrepreneurs. Once they've established that, then you've got the second problem, which is your funding problem, and saying, okay, well, how do I now fund this business to actually kick it off? Then when they eventually got that, then you've got the problem of like, okay, wait a second, how do I run the business? Because let's face it, 99% of our entrepreneurs are operationally proficient but have no idea how to be a CEO.
So now I want to ask you, one of the things that I wanted you to do today on the program was I wanted you to speak about your personal life and your own journey. You're quite successful now. People know you've started businesses. Some of them have been successful, some of them not. And I think a lot of the times when we look at a successful person, we don't see much of their failures and where they've fallen and where they've been at places where like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'd like to talk about that with you a little bit. The failures, because without those failures, there isn't much of a story, is there?
No. I maintain you just can't be successful if you haven't failed. And then I started 13 businesses. I failed at 9 businesses. Okay. I have failed to the point of sleeping in a car with my daughter for several months and not being able, relying on a manager at a service station giving us leftover pies and stuff for the day so that I could feed my daughter, opening up the shop so that I could help her brush her teeth and all of that kind of stuff so I could take her to school, I've been at that level of having nothing to the point of where I sold a business for 110 million US, So I've been at both extremes, but failure was a key component. And, looking back, when failure happens, it's not nice. We all look at it and say, you know what, I should have, could have, etc., But I took lessons in that, and I actually learned from an early age to actually list down. My father taught me, he said, you know what, when you fail, you can make a list of everything that you learned from that failure so that you do not do it again. And that has helped me through and through. I've never made the same mistake twice. I've made a lot of different mistakes. Yeah. Okay, make no mistake, in various industries. But I've never made the same one twice.
So now we have to go back because I want more detail about that story. So what happened? You start this business, it is successful. What happened for you to build a business and then lose it to the point where you don't have a home anymore?
Yeah, that was a partnership issue at the end of the day. I was defrauded in that by my partner, accountants and that overseas, unfortunately. And I lost about 9.5 million US out of that. And I came back, I was in South Africa and went to the ATM and I didn't have money. I just actually did not have money. And I was just basically defrauded. It's the simplest story of that was I was defrauded. The incorrect agreements, not reading my agreements properly, trust was the big thing, I'm very much I'm an honorable person. If you tell me you're going to do something, I trust you. I believe that. And in business, you can't have that. Everything needs to be in black and white, unfortunately. And that was a very hard lesson for me to learn. But at the same time, I also believe that there was a certain amount of karma in that. I had, to be successful in it, I had done a lot of things which were questionable in business too. And I'm also a strong believer in karma and saying, well, if you're going to do those things, eventually it's going to catch up with you.
Dennis, I've spoken to some successful people where they've had their rock bottom, where I was speaking to you about a young entrepreneur that we had spoken to and had made his first million when he was 21 and had lost most of it in the space of such a short time. What is that like? When you have these big dreams in your head and then you wake up the next morning and it's all gone. And it's even worse than starting from the beginning, because probably when you started, you had a place to stay, you had a car. But when everything's taken from you and you are in the negative numbers, not even at zero, you are on the other side of the timeline. Yeah.
It is the hardest thing I could possibly imagine. I've been through a lot of hardships and that, but losing everything, it's a pride thing. It was a pride thing, was probably the big thing. But it breaks you down that you constantly just want to cry. You just look at something, you want to cry and that. And I was sitting with my daughter in the car, and we're sleeping in the car, and she's looking at me and she says, Dad, and she can see I'm sad, and she's always want to cuddle me and stuff. And she says, Dad, you know what? We don't need the money. We just need each other. All we need is love. And you know what? It broke me, and I was just like, you know what? I've got to do something, Enough feeling sorry for myself and that. Because I was at the point of where I was, suicide was not very far away in your mind. And the only reason you don't do that is, I've got a daughter. What's going to happen to my daughter and that? It's the only reason. It pushed me to that point of where you would actually consider something like that. And I can say my daughter actually pulled me out of that and just said, Dad, you know what, don't worry. We've got each other. Let's move forward. And, I went out and I tried again, and I had the right people supporting me. And the next thing you knew, I was way up at the top again, and it's a change of mindset. You've got to get out of that mindset of thinking of the now. What am I going to do tonight? What am I going to do tomorrow? Stop thinking of that. Start thinking forward. Start planning forward. And as soon as you've got that, you remove that kind of negativity. Bearing in mind, I also had to remove a lot of people out of my life. So there were a lot of negative and false people.
But I want to talk a little bit about people, because you would have obviously had business relationships. You would have had friends where they know you as Denis, a successful entrepreneur. Talk about rebuilding. I would imagine there would be a loss of reputation in the business world as well. If you could be that successful and then you lost everything, how can we trust to do business with you?
Yes. That was a big thing. I must, in hindsight, every one of those true friends and business partners, when they found out what had happened, I hadn't told anyone. It was a pride thing. I'm a very proud person. I wasn't going to tell anyone I was in trouble. I wasn't going to ask for help. Which was really my downfall at the end of the day too. But every one of them came back to me and said, Denis, why did you not tell us? We would have been there for you. We would have lifted you up. We would have taken you. And it was pride, However, there were a lot of people that were my friends, they were on the yachts together, they're driving in the Fouries with me, staying in my houses, etc. And they just disappeared. So when the trouble happened, and I picked up the phone to call them to say, guys, you know what, all I need is someone just to talk to, and that, the phone wouldn't be answered. That hurts a person. But then after all of this, when I had picked myself up, and the business world found out, and I was very open about it. I said, guys, this is what's happened to me. But bearing in mind, I also understand their stories. Not one entrepreneur that I know, one top executive that I know, has come from something up and never failed. Everyone has failed. Every top entrepreneur I know has failed somewhere along the line. And I shared my story. I said, guys, this is actually what happened. And it was a funny thing then for me. And they were shocked, and they said, Denis, what the hell? Why did you not pick up the phone and phone me? And I was like, it's pride. It's pride. I wasn't going to do that. So, in terms of loss of reputation, I don't think I really lost a lot. I'm very open with my failures. I've started 13 businesses, failed at 9. Not consecutively, but, I failed at 9 businesses. That's what makes me good as a mentor. I can go there and say, I can tell you 9 different ways in terms of not to do things, I've learned the hard way in terms of what works and what doesn't work. So I've used it to my advantage rather than to, as something like which is considered a black dot.
I wanted to talk about what went on in your head when you decided, okay, now I've got to get out of the pits of feeling sorry for myself and getting up and trying to rebuild my life.
My motivation was purely my daughter. I must be honest. It was 100% just, what am I going to do to make life better for Jordan, and it was like, playing with so many different ideas, there were so many ideas as an entrepreneur and a visionary, especially, I come up with a lot of ideas, but not everything is necessarily practical in that. Trying to pick myself up from that, well, it was hard. I mean, if it wasn't for my daughter constantly motivating me, saying, Dad, don't worry, man. Dad, everything's a great idea. Everything you do is great, Dad. I mean, that was awesome. It was a lie, but but it was awesome. But I had the right friends around me too. You know, I had friends that came there and, you know, they would be honest with me, you know, where they could say, you know, Denis, that's a great idea, but what about this and this?
When you talk about friends though, I mean, I see it with myself and I can see it with other people as well. It's almost as though when you fail, you don't want anybody to know about it. You just want to hide.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly what I did. So I actually cut off a lot of my friends when all of that happened. And it's only in the last 2 years that I've actually reconnected with a lot of them. And I've told them my story, and they were like, many of them were shocked, you know, in terms of saying, well, Denis, why didn't you give us a call, etc. And your close friends were the ones that I never called. You know, the average friends, the ones that, you know, were always taking advantage during when you had it all, you know, those ones never, you know, bothered returning your calls. But your close friends, it's a pride thing. Again, pride is your downfall.
So for you, I mean, you can't go step by step, but what was the game changer for you? That, okay, now from dumps to in a much stronger position. What for you was, you know, a catalyst for that?
The day that I changed my mindset from, you know, can I possibly do it, to I can do it. That day was when I realized, after having spoken to friends and them supporting me and coming up with different ideas and saying, you know what, actually I can do this. There's no reason I can't do this. I've been thinking about this idea for 2-3 years and nothing's ever come from it. You know, I subsequently went down in the dumps, etc. But I never did anything because it was, oh, can I? Instead of, well, I'm going to do it. End of story. There was no discussion about it. It's just, I'm going to do it.
How important is that confidence thing? Because I think
it is extremely important. I mean, people that I mentor, you know that I'm very, very picky with people that I mentor, and I'm very limited in terms of the time that I have available for people mentoring. But generally, people come to me for an interview before I even mentor them. And the very first thing that I evaluate is, do you have the passion and determination to succeed? Because if you do not, I will not mentor you. Because if you do not have those two things, you are not going to be successful in business. You know, I can train skill, but I can't train passion and I can't train commitment. That's something you have within yourself. And that's a decision you need to make within yourself, that am I actually going to make a success out of this? Am I willing to sacrifice it all? Entrepreneurship is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Okay, there is no such thing as working 8 to 5. Okay, there's no lunch breaks. There's no weekends off. Entrepreneurship is a commitment 24/7. Are you willing to work for it? It's living like nobody wants to, so that you can eventually live like everyone wants to. You know, 5-10 years down.
But one of the things that I've seen you do in your personal life, and this is a big thing for me, and it matters to me so much how much time I spend with my kids. I know a lot of people say quality over quantity. For me, quantity does matter, you know. And so even when I'm with all the things that I'm doing, it has to be around my children's schedule and my being there for them and raising them. And I see, as busy as you are, that is a priority for you as well, raising your daughter.
Definitely. When I was actively involved, you know, as CEO in my business and that, bearing in mind I now sit as chairman on the board of most of my businesses. But when I was involved as CEO, I had booked out between 5 and 9 every single day was my time with my daughter. I would not accept phone calls, etc. Now, bearing in mind, within the lobbyist group, we were dealing with high profile. So we were dealing with royal families, ambassadors, presidents, etc. And I would get a call at 9 o'clock from a Saudi prince or a Dubai prince, and the first thing I say is, Denis, is Jordan asleep and can we talk? I said, no, sorry man, she's not. And they said, no problem, we're going to call back in 30 minutes, is that okay? Now I maintain, if someone at that level can do that and respect that, then the average entrepreneur or the average supplier or customer can respect that too. I committed that time every single day for my daughter. And it's built that relationship that I have with my daughter. Now what I do is, obviously I've got a lot more time with my daughter. I pick her up every day from school. We go horse riding every day. From the pictures you see on Facebook, we go horse riding pretty much every day. And I really commit my time with her. But I'm living a balanced lifestyle now. You know, there's no reason that you need to constantly rush. You know, when a customer says to me, Denis, I need that quote and I need it now because I need to make a decision. I say, okay, great. You know what, I'll get it to you in the next hour. Can you commit 1 hour after that I receive the order? Because if you cannot commit 1 hour after that, it's not that urgent. Okay, and I can get it to you the next day. Obviously, customer service allowing, but you get the point.
I want to talk a bit about the business that you were able to build after your, when it killed myself, I totally failed, life is absolutely rubbish. After that, the business that you managed to build after that, because I think people are now wondering, okay, so what is that business that he sold for over $100 million US? Yeah.
It was the lobbyist group, and essentially what I did is I was always fascinated with lobbyists in that, and and a lobbyist, by definition, is someone that lobbies on behalf of a business to government to change certain policies, get certain deals, etc. And I said, but why can a lobbyist not be someone that does, works on behalf of a person to a business, or a business to a business? Why does it always have to be to governments, etc.? And why is there such a negative connotation with lobbyists that they do the underhanded dealings? What I want to do is I want to facilitate deals. And I want to go out there and actually build something where we're the facilitators. If you're a supplier and you're a customer, I'm going to put you guys together and you guys are going to do a deal. I'm going to make sure that both of you are verified and can trust each other. Okay. And I tried it in South Africa. I started obviously in South Africa. I had about 20,000 Rand. And no one, 4 months into it, no one was buying, Everyone wanted to do their own thing. They weren't willing to pay for the service of saying, well, I can get you a customer for this, or I can get you a supplier for that. They weren't willing to pay for that service. And I remember pitching it to someone I was at Cedar Square, and I was premier, and I was sitting there, I was pitching it to this guy, giving him the whole pitch and that. And at the end of the day, he just was not interested. And I was like, okay, great. And he gets up, he goes, I sit back and, order myself a drink, and I get this tap on the shoulder, and I turn around, and there's this table of Russians sitting there. How's that? We want to introduce ourselves. Come chat to us. I sat down with them and, shared a few shots, etc. And they said, listen, we're very fascinated. We were listening with half a year that you're a facilitator and a lobbyist and that, and tell us about that. And I said, well, what I want to do is I want to facilitate. And I was very honest. Okay. So honesty, I changed my business approach to where you tend to exaggerate so much that you can't actually deliver, to the point of where, well, this is what I want to do and this is what I can do, and I sold them on myself. Not so much on my business concept, but I sold them that I can deliver what they wanted.
And that was what kick-started.
Exactly. And they said, you know what? We like it. Rough night. Next morning I wake up and I've got this serviette with a telephone number. Anyway, I take it, I throw it in the dustbin. That afternoon, I get a call from an embassy, the Russian embassy, saying, listen, they've got my number from these people. I'm bringing my passport and that. They want to pay for my trip through to Russia and that. Now, we had discussed that even. They said, no, you must come to Russia. We'll pay for your trip. We'll pay for your accommodation. We've got deals there you can do. Now, first off, I was concerned. First off, Russians, I don't know anything about Russians, and that I watch the movies too much, so I'm figuring, okay, well, worst case scenario, I lose some fingers and toes. I go over there. Best case scenario, I end up a sex slave. So, I looked at this and said, oh, well, no, guys, what are you on about? Why must I come through? I said, no, we've got this deal. And I spoke to my friends and I procrastinated for about 4 or 5 days. And eventually, one of my friends said, just go. What have you got to lose? You've got nothing. What have you got to lose? And I got on a plane and I went over. And I ended up meeting some very high-profile individuals and ended up facilitating a several billion-dollar deal.
What would you like for people to walk away with after having spent some time with you?
There's actually quite a few things. The top thing, I'd say, it's not who you know, it's who knows you too. You can have 5,000 friends on Facebook. If I pick up the phone to any one of them, are they going to know who you are? And are they going to know you for you? What made me successful was me selling myself to someone, not my business. It was selling me. Can you do that?
Thank you so much, Denis.
This
is so wonderful. And I hope that we have more of you, and that we can just do like the little bits, where people can get practical stuff, from somebody who's done it, and we can just get some practical advice from you.
Help the troops. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Denis.
Thanks, Anna.